I've reviewed a ton of SSDs, RAID enclosures, and other drives on my YouTube channel, and people love to ask me just how reliable some of them are, how long you can expect for the different hard drives to last. But I found that it's really not a good question to ask if a drive is going to fail, but when it's going to fail, because every drive can fail, and every company has different failure rates, whether it's Western Digital, Samsung, Micron, any of them. So today we're going to talk a little bit about data storage and some of the best practices for it to make sure that you keep your work and your precious memories safe so you don't have to worry about losing any files. We're going to talk about cloud storage, SSDs, and hard drives, and also your computer drive. So the first thing that you need to think about, no matter what, is making sure you have at least one additional copy of any file that's of any importance to you. So when we talk about this, you can buy like a really expensive MacBook that has a super large SSD so you don't have to work off of external enclosures. But what if you take your computer to a coffee shop? You could get in a car accident, your computer could break, it could get stolen, you could spill coffee on your computer, and then you would lose everything because it's only stored on one device. So the first thing that's the most important is just making sure that you have multiple copies of any file that's of importance to you. And this means either on your computer in the cloud or on your computer in another enclosure. That's a great way to get started. Ideally, in a perfect world, you would have one local copy on your computer, another external copy on a different SSD or hard drive or a RAID drive, and you'd also have a cloud copy, and you'd also have a copy that's on another drive at a friend or family member's house. But this scenario can be a little bit unrealistic. Most people are not buying that many different SSDs or enclosures. But it is a good practice to get into that the most important things you do have in multiple locations. The next thing I think you need to think about is I love the cloud. I use iCloud Photos to store all my personal photos. I have a shared library and it works fantastic. But what if something happened to iCloud, or what if the internet's out, or the internet was out for a prolonged period of time, and then you had no actual way to get on the cloud and all your files were just over there? So a couple months ago, I got on my iCloud, I grabbed all my photos, and I exported them all from the cloud onto an external SSD. So now I'm still using the cloud copy, mostly on my phone to access everything, but I also have a separate copy of all those files on its own SSD. And now every month or so, I'm just going to go grab the last few months, export it to that folder on that SSD, and I also have a second SSD that I'm going to be dropping off at a family member's house as well. So I just have multiple copies of it again, because some of those photos are some of the most important memories to me, and I would hate if something happened to my iCloud and I were to lose some of those. I have heard of people upgrading iPhones and they've lost photos before. I don't know how it happened, but they said it happened. So just be aware that even if you're using a cloud service, whether it's iCloud or Google Drive, or any of the other cloud providers, those can have outages and they also are not infallible. So it's awesome if you're able to keep multiple copies on your own drives as well. So first thing is make sure you have multiple copies. The second thing is don't just trust the cloud. So make sure that your files are in multiple places. Another thing I like to think about is sometimes we like to use the cloud for our own personal files or using them for Word documents or stuff like that. It's not quite as big of a deal because the data sizes aren't quite as big. But I found in the world of audio production, video production, and photography, sometimes using the cloud for documents that are being worked on in that way don't always work very well. So you can't necessarily store a Final Cut library on the cloud and expect that you can make an edit and then it'll automatically sync. So there is still a time and a place for manual backups. And it's a great time to do a manual backup when you go for a lunch break or as you're wrapping up your work for a day. Get a fast SSD, plug it into your computer, and copy all your project files. I think this is especially important when you're in the middle of a project. It's not quite as important once you've delivered, once you've been paid for your work, and if you don't need the original source files anymore. So if I make a YouTube video, I do keep all the original files for the project, but once that video gets uploaded to YouTube and I know there's no issues with it, it's a little bit less important because now the project has been delivered to the final place and I'm not really keeping it for a memory's sake. So you kind of have to prioritize a little bit and just know in your head, do I need to access these files later or not? Another thing to think about is for the photographers and videographers of the world, I really recommend using cameras that shoot to 2 card slots because I've had SD cards fail before, or I've had an SD card fall out of a camera and I accidentally step on it. That happened with my drone one time. I had to go back and redo a shoot because of it. Now, this is not as big of an issue for a shoot that can be redone, but if you're shooting an event or a wedding that you can't redo, you really need to make sure that you're writing the 2 cards. And as soon as you get done, I always like to keep the second card, never format it, just leave it in the camera. That acts as a first backup of all the files. And then after you import all the files into your computer, make a copy of all your original files. Don't touch them, don't delete anything, and just throw it off to the side on an extra SSD before you start culling through images or videos or before you start editing. So that's a great way to keep all your files untouched. And then if you accidentally delete a really important picture, and you realize it later, you can go back to your originals on either your backup SD card or on that backup SSD at the beginning. So backup SD cards and backing up all your files at the beginning of a project are also super important in the world of file management. Lastly, I just want to tie this all up by saying it really stinks when you lose data, and I'm not trying to minimize anyone who's had issues with losing data in the past, but SSDs are cheaper than ever, and if we're making the right decisions as we're working on our workflow, figuring out how to edit projects, edit files, then we have tons of opportunities to very quickly copy all of our files. And I'm not always the best at this either, but anytime I'm working on a really important project, I try to take periodic breaks, copy all my work, because it would really stink to lose days of work that I spent on a project, or also to just have to go back and redo something again instead of getting to work on something new to make more money or to just have the creative fulfillment of doing new projects. So make sure you're making backups to multiple locations. Also, if you can go store the physical drives at different locations, that's a great opportunity as well to make sure your files are a little bit more space. Don't put all your trust in the cloud, because there will be times when the internet is inaccessible or also where other services just aren't working right. And finally, whenever you're getting very important files off of a camera, make sure you're writing to 2 cards if possible and make a copy of them at the beginning of it as well before you delete anything. That way you always have that backup to fall back upon. If you have any other thoughts about this topic of file storage and data management and how you make sure that you're following best practices, leave a comment or send me a message on my website, adamtalks.tech. If you have any other thoughts about this type of content, I'm also really curious to hear your comments on it as well. Have a great day and see you in the next episode.